According to Fox News, the NFL rule book states in Rule 5, Section 4, Article 8, there's guidelines for what the players are and are not allowed to wear while at the stadium. Throughout the period on game day that a player is visible to the stadium and television audience, including in pregame warmups, in the bench area, and during postgame interviews in the locker room or on the field, players are prohibited from wearing, displaying, or otherwise conveying personal messages either in writing or illustration, unless such messages have been approved in advance by the league office. And so the league will not grant permission for any club or player to wear, display, or otherwise convey messages through helmet decals, armbands, jersey patches, mouthpieces, or other items affixed to game uniforms or equipment which relate to political activities or causes, other non-football events, causes, or campaigns. So there's a whole litany of things that they can't do. So it sounds like he's facing a fine. Doesn't say what that fine will be, but it sounds like he's facing a fine for that the other night.
Two quick things on that, Krug. I got to shout out the greatest league violation of all time in terms of violating that group of ordinances you just described. You got to shout out Jim McMahon, dude, for wearing the headband that said Roselle. I mean, dude, think about that. Oh, I can't wear anything? No messages? How about if I put a headband on with your name, Commish? Like that was just, I mean, that was like the all-time punk rock moment of the NFL. But on a serious note about right now, what I've wondered, Krugs, in the aftermath of the whole Bosa MAGA hat thing is, I guess I have two things to ask about you, just what your feeling on this is. One, is it or will it cause a distraction of any kind with the team in the locker room? And two, do you think that this is something Shanahan will speak with Bosa about privately? I don't know. What's your take?
Oh, I bet you he would. But, also, I mean, no impact on the room. No impact at all. It's, every guy in there knows that Nick is a conservative, that, he's his politics or he's conservative. So nobody is surprised by that. Like when Kittle and Purdy looked up, they looked a little surprised, but, they knew what it was. It wasn't like, oh my God, I can't believe that he's wearing this hat. It's like, they knew. They kind of know what Nick's about, and that he's conservative. So I think, the one thing about the NFL, it's the ultimate meritocracy, right? So, everything's based on merit. They don't have, there's not a lot of, I don't hear or ever see any debates about anything. They're not debating weather. They're not debating politics. They're not debating religion. They're not debating race. They're not debating. They're not, you know what I mean? It's just not, it's just not a place where guys debate. It's, and if they do it outside of the eyes and ears of the media. So I don't think it has any impact. I don't think it has any impact in that room if a bunch of people were voting left. I don't think it has a big impact if a bunch of people were voting right. The one thing about the players is they have such a respect for one another that everything stays very civil. It's like when you play a sport as violent as football, these guys have a respect for one another that really goes beyond the average workplace common respect.
Well said. Well said. Yes, very well said.
These guys admire each other's toughness, dedication, and they're not going to, and they know that they need staying together is like part of the plan. You know what I mean? It says in the locker room. You know what it says in the locker room? There's the rules. The Niners' only rules. The rule number 1, protect the team. Rule number 2, no excuses. Rule number 3, don't be late. That's it. Those are the rules.
Yeah.
And they're on the wall for those guys, for all the players to see. Protect the team means don't comment on Nick Bosa's MAGA hat. Don't make big stories out of nothing. You know what I mean? Protect the team. Put the team first. If you think it's in the team's best interest to have a gigantic political debate in the middle of their locker room, then that's one thing. But I think if you asked Shanahan and Lynch, they would tell you that that's not in their best interest, and that they've told the players that they don't want that. So, I think for the most part, Nick probably crossed somewhat of a line here because he, went political. But you know what? I think they're a lot more understanding in the room than outside the room.
How do you feel about and I'm sure you've picked up on this thread since the hat incident occurred, which is there are some 49er fans that are upset. I've seen a lot of this on social media where they're like, hey, man, why did Colin Kaepernick get blackballed for making a political statement? But if Nick Bosa is making a political statement, that's okay. Like in your mind, granted, they're both 49ers. There's no getting around that. But in your mind,
I think that's the only comparison. That's the only connection.
Yeah.
I mean, one guy decided to sit for the anthem and then decided to kneel for the anthem. And whether he wanted it to be about the anthem or not, he made it about the anthem. And that was about the anthem. And, a lot of people felt like that was disrespect. Now, there were a lot of people that after he clarified that, hey, it was not about the anthem. It was about him speaking up against,
police brutality and
police brutality and I'm having a hard time finding the words, but he basically
civil rights, all that stuff. Yeah.
He was talking about police brutality and trying to shine a light on it.
Yes.
And it's not the same. I mean, there's going to be millions of people that vote for both candidates.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's to say that you're just one of many that will be voting for one of the two major party candidates. I don't think that is the same as Colin Kaepernick taking a knee for the anthem.
That's a great way of putting it. That was funny, man. That was good. I like that.
But I mean, I do understand, people are just kind of going real simplistic and like politics. It's all politics. Okay.
Yeah.
But it was more than that. It was more than that. And I will say this, there was a huge resentment for Kaepernick among the 49er players. It may not have been spoken, but I literally witnessed offensive linemen who were really upset that he was holding court talking about non-football in the middle of the locker room in the post game. I literally saw offensive linemen swearing about it as they're walking in a towel to the showers. And so I mean, it's like, and that happened. It wasn't like, well, you're speculating. No, I'm not speculating. 49er offensive linemen were pissed that he was holding court talking about himself and his cause and his mission and his, motivations and non-football in the middle of the locker room in the postgame.
And that's why I brought this up with Bosa, wondering if we're going to have a similar situation. So far, it doesn't seem to be the case, but you're right. I remember those media scrums at Kaepernick's locker. I mean, there was literally zero football questions being asked. It was all politics and what motivated you, and are you a radical, and are you a revolutionary, and all this kind of stuff. So they were having these long, intense political media scrums with Kaepernick right in the middle of the locker room. And I'm not saying that the Nick Bosa thing's going to turn into that at all. I'm not saying that, but I do wonder if reporters are going to get to Nick and say, hey, let's talk about what happened. And that's where stuff can kind of spin out. If he starts getting peppered with a lot of questions, I mean, who knows what he'll say or what somebody else could say. And I guess all of that being said and being considered, I just hope there's no distraction in the long run. I hope it doesn't turn into that kind of Kaepernick situation. And like I said, I haven't seen much evidence of that, Krug. Like, I haven't even really heard him comment on it in the aftermath. I don't know if he's given any quotes. Have you seen anything from Bosa?
Well, I mean, I was at the presser and Eric Branch asked him about it. And he said, why are you speaking out on it now? And he said the climate has changed.
Yeah.
So in reality, I think there's probably a lot of people who, like Donald Trump, who would never talk about it in the past, and for whatever reason now feel like there's more momentum for them. I don't know. I'm trying to guess really more than anything, but he probably just feels safer in coming out. I mean, there's a lot of people that, especially in a left, place like San Francisco, where it's, they're going to vote overwhelmingly left. He's trying to hide his political affiliations. Now he has not, but there are plenty of other people that I'm sure have, just because they don't want to have their car keyed, or they don't, whatever it is, they don't want to have to answer for it in the workplace. So I think there's a lot of people probably sitting there going, Nick's doing this. He's letting his who he's voting for be known. There's that still is he's probably more the exception than the rule, right?
Yeah.
There's probably more people that are like, hey, I don't want to go political. And yet everybody probably has some political thought or some lean. Sure. And yet none of these players ever talk about it. And the election's next week. So it's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it makes you kind of wonder, you know that there's some guys in that room that are passionate, and yet they just don't talk about it. Whether they're passionate to the left or passionate for the right, but they're passionate, and they talk to their wives and girlfriends and at home behind closed doors and the safety of their home. They talk about it, but they don't talk about it in the locker room. And I think if the Niners had their druthers, I think that everybody would take that tact and not talk about it in the locker room. I think if they could choose, that's what they would choose.
And it's really funny to me, Larry. I mean, I'm sure you can sympathize with this, because you and I, being sports talk guys for so long, inevitably you will come across a story like this where politics and sports, they kind of merge or intersect. And then what I always thought was really funny, Krugs, is that the listeners, they start getting pissed. They'd be calling in, hey, Murphy Mac, why are you guys talking about Kaepernick, man? This isn't a political show. But then you have to explain, well, I get that, but this has become the biggest story in sports. Like if you turn on SportsCenter, Colin Kaepernick's protest was the lead story. So yeah, we're going to address it. He's a 49er. He's on the flagship. We got to talk about this stuff. Same with Nick Bosa. But it's just funny how everyone, like the end result of all this stuff is the listeners usually wind up getting super pissed.
Well, I mean, I understand that. Why? Because we work in we work in what the FAO Schwartz of life. It's like we're in the toy department. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So people in the toy department are coming to the toy department because they want a break.
Yes.
From the political discourse.
And
they want a break from the realities of the economy. They want to break from all this talk about immigration. They want to break from that. They want, the old, was it Richard Nixon or Truman or whatever, one president, I forget what president it was. And he said, I always go read the sports section first because it's the one part of the newspaper where I can go and read about men's accomplishments and not their failures.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Which is really well said if you think about it, because what is in the news? This person raped that person. This person robbed that person. This person, you know what I mean?
I do.
It's not necessarily about accomplishments. It's about, crimes and things that people have done to one another that are bad. So a lot of times people don't want to read that. And they also, here's the bottom line too is, look, it's back to the MJ. Hey, he never had a political voice. And yet he had tons of power. And his whole thing was Republicans buy Nikes too.
Yeah, right.
So it's like the same thing. It's like, why would you cut your audience in half?
That's right.
By picking a political side when you know that, half the country's voting for candidate X, half the country's voting for candidate Y, but you are going to go political, tell people what side you were on, and you're going to get into this thing where you're kind of either lecturing them directly or you're kind of indirectly sneaking in your comments here and there and shading things the way you want to shade them. And it's like, you know what? People get even a tiny dose of that and they're like, I'm out. I'm out.
Yep, that's right.
Don't politicize yourself. I'm out. I'm here because I want to hear about the Giants last night. I'm here because I want to hear about the Niners at the bye week. Right. I'm here because, man, the Warriors just won back-to-back from the Pelicans, and I want you guys to talk about it. I'm not here so you can espouse your political beliefs through your sports radio station to a big audience. That I'm not here for that. And so I don't know. I mean, I think that's my read on it.
I agree with everything you said, man. I agree with every word of that. And just as like a performer, as a guy who's trying to connect with an audience, the last thing, well, there's two things I feel. One, the last thing people that are listening to, anything that I've been involved with, the Murph and Mac show, my podcast, what have you, I don't kid myself and pretend, Larry, that the masses are interested in my political takes or that's one. Like, I'm not that foolish to think, let me enlighten the audience today about my political views. No, I'm not that stupid, and I'm not going to go there. And then two,
well, you're not that kind of a personality. I mean,
I'm not.
You're not like one of these people that walks in the room and says, everybody sit down and gather round. I'm going to share wisdom. You know what I mean?
No. And then, of course, the other thing is once you open that door and start talking politics, as you said, Larry, you are automatically going to piss off half your audience. And I have no interest.
Can't win.
Yeah, I have no interest in that. I'd rather bring us all together. So it's just going to be an interesting time to see just how people react, to see if there's any aftermath. I just want to, kind of run that up the flagpole, see what you thought.
No, I totally think you're right. I think it's smart because ultimately, and it's not just about winning the ratings battle, but I mean, if you're in radio, you're involved in a ratings battle. So you do, you have an interest there.
Yeah.
But it's also just about, hey, the majority of the people that are coming to you because you're not going to talk about these things.
That's right.
And so if you cross that lane, and it's like, there's a lot of people in radio who are like, the world needs to hear my thoughts.
Oh,
you know what I mean? And it's that's what I loved about Gary. It's like, I loved working with Gary because Gary was like, no, they don't. You know what I mean? Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
He was the king of nobody cares. I mean, nobody cares. You know what I mean? And I love that about him. And he understood it. It's like, hey, we're in the toy department and people are here because they're looking for a relief. They're looking for, let me get out of this conversation that I'm hearing everywhere. And let me talk about the Giants. Can we talk about the Giants and the Niners and the Warriors for my 90-minute commute? Can I just not have to hear somebody lecture me about their beliefs or what I should be doing, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and I agree. I respect that space. I want people to come and get away from it, have a good time with us. I'm all for it, man. Absolutely.